When we think about the fall of Rome, most of us imagine scenes of barbarians storming the gates, legions collapsing, or emperors being poisoned in stone palaces. But an empire doesn't collapse just from external attacks. It starts rotting from within. And one of the most destructive forces behind that decay is always money. Rome didn't fall just because of invasions or corruption. The main reason was the collapse of its currency. And the lessons from that collapse are still relevant for any modern economy that thinks it can play with money without consequences. Let's set the scene a bit more clearly. For centuries, the backbone of Rome's economy was the silver denarius. First minted around 211 BC, this coin was nearly pure silver and remained trusted throughout the empire and even beyond. Roman soldiers were paid in denarii. Merchants demanded it. People stored their wealth in it. The denarius was more than just money. It was tangible trust. The empire's power drew its value from the coin. As long as people trusted Rome, they trusted its currency. But running an empire is neither easy nor cheap. The wages of legions, roads, and aqueducts, the costs of endless wars. By the 2nd century, Rome was struggling to maintain its stance against Germanic tribes in the north, the Parthians in the east, and unrest at home. Revenue from taxes wasn't enough to cover military expenses. The emperors resorted to a well-known trick, debasement, reducing the precious metal content in coins. Instead of raising more taxes, which would always anger the people, they chose to decrease the silver content of the denarius. The numbers tell the story. During Augustus's reign, the denarius was about 95% pure silver. By the early 3rd century, under Caracalla, it had fallen to 50%. Under Gallienus, it dropped below 5%. Once nearly pure silver, the coin was now little more than a thin silver-plated bronze disc. The people could see it and feel the consequences. Inflation soared. Because the currency no longer held real value, prices skyrocketed. A measure of wheat that once cost 1 denarius now went for dozens. This wasn't theoretical, it ruined the lives of ordinary Romans. Soldiers demanded higher pay to cover their expenses. Merchants stopped accepting the devalued coins, turning to gold or barter. Trade returned to direct barter as money lost its trustworthiness. As confidence vanished, emperors resorted to minting even more worthless coins, relying on quantity instead of value. This vicious cycle repeated in other economic crises throughout history. The crisis reached its peak during the 3rd century crisis. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome endured nearly 50 years of invasions, plagues, civil wars, and economic collapse. Emperors came and went so quickly that some lasted only a few months. Behind this political chaos lay a broken financial system. Taxes were increasingly paid with worthless coins. Farmers abandoned their land when they couldn't pay. Trade networks fell apart. Rome tried desperate measures, price inspections, forced labor, but nothing worked. One emperor, Diocletian, tried to stop the collapse. In 301 AD, he issued the maximum price edict, setting price caps for hundreds of goods and services. Violation meant death. But the edict was a disaster. No law can fix prices when money is worthless. Black markets boomed, official trade collapsed. The people quickly realized that a broken coin cannot be fixed by law. Eventually, Rome abandoned the denarius altogether. Around 312 AD, Constantine introduced the pure gold Solidus, which provided stability in Byzantium for centuries. But by then, it was too late. Western Rome had become an empire emptied from within. So what does this mean for us today? Destroying money is destroying empires. Rome thought it could fool its people with coins increasingly stripped of their metal content. Modern states do the same, printing money, manipulating interest rates, or eroding debt through inflation. The result is always the same. The people pay the price, wealth disappears, trust is lost. History gave us this lesson through Rome, and if we ignore it, it will give it to us again. Every major inflation crisis has followed the same pattern. States dilute money, the wealthy protect themselves with real assets, and the public is driven into poverty. Rome was just the first full-scale example, a collapse in motion. By the 20th century, these echoes became even clearer. Weimar Germany, 1923. Versailles' heavy reparations forced the state to print money. Bread prices went from 1 mark to 200 billion marks. People carried their wages in wheelbarrows. Lifelong savings of retirees were wiped out. Social collapse opened the door for extreme politics and paved the way for Hitler's rise. Zimbabwe, 2000s. Production collapsed, debt soared, and the government printed money. By 2008, inflation reached 89.7 sextillion% annually. Prices doubled every day. Eventually, the country had to abandon its currency entirely. But we don't even need extreme examples. Even modern developed economies experience echoes of Rome's story. USA, 1971. President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. From that moment, the dollar became, in economist terms, fiat, money based solely on trust. Debt grew, money supply expanded, and inflation became a persistent specter. What $1 could buy in 1971 costs more than $6 today. The bills look the same, the paper is the same, but the value has quietly eroded. What makes today dangerous is that this happens on a global scale. Rome's collapse was limited to an empire. Weimar was national. Zimbabwe was local. Today the world relies on massive debts and central banks ready to print trillions at each crisis. This means the next collapse won't be confined to one country. It will spread worldwide, and history always says the same thing. The people pay the price, not the elites. Millions tied to wages, savings, and pensions. So, as an individual, what can you learn from Rome's currency crisis? Inflation isn't an accident, it's policy. For 2,000 years, silent taxation has destroyed empires. Real wealth isn't on paper. It's in assets that retain value even when money collapses. Land, skills, productive work, resources. Never assume price stability is permanent. Tell the Romans their money would collapse, and they'd laugh. In 1913, Germans couldn't even imagine the wheelbarrows of cash they would carry. In the 1980s, Zimbabweans had high hopes for prosperity after independence. Rome's fall reminds us. Financial systems crumble quietly, then suddenly. When money loses its reality, society starts to unravel. Contracts fail, trade stops, armies collapse, governments lose legitimacy. The barbarians at the gate finish the job, but the true killer is always in the treasury. And here's the takeaway. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but if you ignore it, it will catch up with you. Rome's monetary problem wasn't just bad emperors or greedy elites. It was a story about how fragile money becomes when misused, and that fragility has never gone away. If this gave you a fresh perspective, subscribe. History is full of answers, and I'll show you where to find them.